Hello everyone. In this video, I will talk about deploying a Dockerized web application on Azure. As a precursor to deployment on Azure, I would like to speak about Dockerizing our web application. So let us go to the directory. In this directory, you can observe that we have the contents as follows. Pharmacy is the name of our web application. And these are the contents in the directory pharmacy. We have HTML, PHP, few images, and a video page. That is again a HTML file. So this is the contents. These are the contents of our pharmacy web application folder. This is the CSV file containing the data for filling the database with details. This is right now not to be considered. Docker file is the file which is containing the instructions to produce the Docker image. I will come to that later. Next, we have this. This file is basically for configuring public access to PHP admin. This is significant because we need to populate the data in the database. So we require this file to configure access. So, for accessing PHP admin and putting the data there. Test.sh is also significant because the Docker container without this will immediately exit after creation. This file, so since it immediately exits after creation, we have to keep the container running always. So to keep the container running always, we use this test.sh script, which basically consists of a while loop that runs infinitely. Coming to the contents of the Docker file. So what happens here is that we are pulling from Ubuntu Bionic. So this is the default image that we are using in our creation of the web image. Prior to preparing this Docker file, we need to experiment how to produce a Docker image. After that, we have to map those instructions to a Docker file. This is the Docker file after that initial mapping. We need to use the image. In this case, it is Ubuntu Bionic image. Then we need to copy the Linux installer.run file into the opt directory in the container. And there are various such commands which are necessary to configure the container here. The result of running this Docker file is that we have a Docker image. So a Docker file is a set of instructions that tells the Docker engine to produce an image using these instructions. XAMPP Linux 64 and blah 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 .run is basically our installation file for the XAMPP server. Pharmacy application runs on XAMPP server. So we need this installation file for creating a server in our container. So what do you mean by a container? A container is a running instance of a Docker image. Now, to create an image using these contents, we just issue sudo docker build. This is it. By doing this, we'll immediately have our Docker image. I'm skipping this step because it has already been done. To list the images, we just issue sudo docker images. So this is the image that I have got out of the build command. What happens is that Build command produces an image with just an ID and not a name. So we need to use sudo docker tag followed by the image ID and the, so in this case it is like this, followed by the name of the Docker image that we want to give. So this can be anything. In this case, I gave this slash OS project colon latest. This entire thing is the name of the Docker image, and this is the tag that we assign to the image. So in this case, it is latest. This can be anything. So for convenience, it is good to put latest because most of the cases under default pulling of the images, the latest tag is used. Once we do this, to run the container, we just have to issue sudo docker run p followed by the port on the host and the port on the container where the XAMPP server will be listening. So on this port, our XAMPP server will process the requests. And this is the image name. So this is an example. So if we want to run this, we have to just give the name of our the name of our image. In this case, what I'll do is I'll give the name as sudo docker. So name as something like container. So I can give we can give any name here for the container, followed by the name of the image, docker cool exp slash os project latest. So this is the command that creates a Docker container and runs it. So let us go. As you can see, the exam server is starting. Under the exam server, we are starting 3 services, Apache, MySQL, and Pro FTPD. So Pro FTPD is not actually necessary for our application, but it is convenient to start the entire exam server instead of individually starting each and every service. Now open a web browser. We open the web browser so that we can check if the container is running or not. In order to see if the container is running or not, type this command. Type this in the web browser, localhost, followed by the port which we gave there. So I gave there as 8000. I have to give 8000 only. Let me type this. As you can see, it is showing the XAMPP welcome page. Where is our application? To see the application, you have to type like this. This is our application. Initially, if we go here, there will be no data because we have not put the data in the database and we have not created the database itself. In order to create the database, we have to go to phpMyAdmin. phpMyAdmin is a good GUI tool for dealing with SQL databases that we create as part of our web application. It was asking for a database known as staff. When we opened our application, it was saying an error saying that the database staff does not exist. So in order to create such a database, simply we have to go here, create a database like this, staff. So our database used by the web application is this. Then college is the name of the table in that database, which has 9 columns. So the column names are as follows. These are the column names. Now we have to give an appropriate data type. Followed by the length. Now we click on save. Our database has been configured and we have also successfully created a table for the database. Now we have to fill this table with some data. This is where the college.csv comes into play. I go to exam. This is where the CSV file is located. Let me open it. So the first row actually consists of the column names, but here I just want to fill it with the data. So I'm concerned only with data, so I'm skipping the first row. So I click on go. So as you can see, the data has been successfully inserted. So we have the data here. Now to check if our database is being accessible, let me click on products. So now you can see that the data is being successfully so the data is being successfully fetched from the database. So this is how our database application has been containerized. Now comes the difficult part. We have to we have to deploy the Dockerized application on a cloud. So how to do that? So this is the Azure portal. Whatever we have to do for deployment in Azure, we have to do it in this portal. So the portal has an option known as Cloud Shell. This is the most important option for this video because this is where we will be issuing all the commands. Where are the commands? Commands for this tutorial, for this video are here. But This is not enough. This is just for understanding sake. For detailed information on how the Dockerized application is deployed on Azure, you can go to my GitHub repository named as Docker project, and the link for this. So this is the PDF file containing all the information about the project, and the link to the to my GitHub repository is as follows. So this is the link to my GitHub repository. So we must open a Cloud Shell. Next, I was talking about the Docker file and some other file which I said I would talk about later. The main use of this Docker file was to build the image as I had shown earlier, and because of technical difficulties that I faced while manually building the image in Azure, I decided to go for this. So what happened here was that I successfully built a Docker image using the Docker file in Azure, where I used the concept of Azure Container Registry. I created an image known as web image in the Azure Container Registry. I was able to successfully run the application, but the problem was to persist the data. What do I mean by persistent? The data should not disappear after restarts of the web app. The Docker file was not effective in producing the required persistency. This is because the volume option in Docker file can only create a volume but not initialize it during startup. We have another alternative known as Docker Compose. So Docker Compose looks like this. I have the version, I have the services, and I have the volumes option. So we can give any name for the service. This image we can see here. This is the image that I have deployed in the Docker Hub. How did I deploy? What I did is that I used Docker login, sudo docker login. So I have already logged in, so it is showing that login succeeded. Otherwise, you have to give your username and password. Now, we have the image that we created from the Docker file, and the reason why I named my image like this was also specific. It has a reason. Docker cool exp is the name of my registry in the Docker Hub. And OS project, so this can be anything. This name can be anything, but this is very important. This has to be the name of your Docker Hub registry. Then to push this registry to Docker Hub, simply we have to give the command sudo docker push. So I have already done this step, and the result of this step was an image in the Docker Hub. That image is now being pulled in the Docker Compose file. Unlike Docker file, which was not having any extension, Docker Compose is a service that basically uses a Docker Compose.yml file. So it is specifically using a YML file for deployment. The problem which I had mentioned earlier about persistency is being solved here. Volumes. Docker volume is a standard way of persisting the data in a Docker container. The thing here in Azure is that we directly cannot use Docker here. So if I use Docker images, it shows this. This means that I directly cannot use Docker commands here. So what I need to do? So I have created this docker compose.yml file here. After this, we need to put all these files under one directory in the Azure. As I told, this is the most important step in this video. Go here. Then to get that directory, we need to issue a command known as. So what do you mean by the directory? I have mentioned this several times. This is the directory which I was talking about. So this directory is nothing but my GitHub repository. How to get the GitHub repository as a directory here? For that, we simply issue the command git clone followed by the URL of my GitHub repository. This is the URL of my GitHub repository. If I press enter, I will have created the GitHub, I would have created a directory. So let me just show the directory here. As you can see, there's a directory known as Docker project, which is nothing but the name of my GitHub repository. Let me go there. So we can see various files which are nothing but the contents of this registry. This can be ignored. So this is something of an experiment which I was trying before. But you can see something known as XAMPP Linux 64.run, which is not there in this directory. So how did I get this file? To get this file, I used wget followed by the link through which we can download the installation file. If you want that link, you can go to the PDF file which I have in my GitHub repository. You can find it there. Yes, so this is the link. So to get the installation file from the download link, use the command wget and followed by the link. This will download a file known as download, which is nothing but our installation file. So we need to name it appropriately. For that, I used mv download followed by the name which we want. So this is the name. Next, we have all the things ready here. What we must do now? The next step is to create a resource group. To create a resource group, we simply use this command, which will create a resource group under the location South Central US. So this can be under the list of zones in the Azure. So this can be anything like East US, West US, Australia, Central India, etc. And this is the name of the resource group, which again can be anything, but it should be unique, and it will tell you if that the name has already been taken by someone else. And the same thing happens even for all the other things like service plan app and all, because it is a service which has to be unique across the globe. But it's not a problem because you can just change the name and it will automatically tell you if it is correct, if it is okay or not. This is the command that you use to create the resource group. Next step is to create a service plan under that resource group. So this is the command. For that, yeah, I'm sorry. So this is the command that we use to create the Azure App Service Plan. So service plan is basically a holder for the app. It is mentioning what are the specifications for that app, like what are the configuration, what type of resources does it use. In this case, it is using S1. while I used F1 because F1 is completely free. Next step is to create the app itself. To create the app, we use the same resource group which we created earlier and the service plan which we created earlier. Here we give the name whatever we want, and in my case I gave the name as STY app 2. So give this command to create the web app. Now, one more important thing to notice here is that we have something known as Docker Compose WordPress.yml. This should be renamed as, this should be replaced with dc.yml. So I have put every single detail in the PDF file. Please refer this for more details. dc.yml is the same file which I showed here, this itself. So this is only the dc.yml. So for convenience, I just named it as dc.yml. But if you want to particularly use Docker Compose, then it has to be Docker Compose.yml only. So we have to replace here this line with dc.yml. Once that's done, we'll have the web app created and it will run successfully. But we need to do one more small change, and that is to basically persist the data. What happens is that for our purpose, the volume command is enough. But in Azure, we have to tell the web app that you have to store the content. So how do you tell the web app to store the content? We store the content using command as follows, using this command. So it basically involves changing the settings to an appropriate value. So what will be the changes that we make? So the changes that we make here are as follows. We go to that app, and this is the most important thing. Settings, websites enable app service storage equal to true. Any web app that we create in Azure has some amount of storage with it. In case of our free app, it has 1 GB storage, which is more than sufficient for our application. This is necessary for persisting the data in our database. What happens here is that in the app storage now, the volume will be created. What we were seeing here, that is in this Docker Compose.yml, this data will now be persisted in our app service storage. So this is the meaning of the setting here. Once all of these steps have been completed successfully, we have our web app. So we can just go to the portal after this. We have to search for it and we find it as STY app 2 because I have named it here as STY app 2. In your case, you just search for the app name that you have given. Go to this. Let me click on browse. As you can see, the application is running successfully. And now I have already created the database. I have already stored the database. I've filled it with the data. As you can see, staff. Now the significance that you can see here is that I had kept it like before so much of time. I kept it about 1 hour before all this data. Azure free app idles out after 20 minutes. But you can see here that this data is still here. So this means that our data is being successfully persisted. Now you can see that the data is here successfully. And now to just run our application. So there you go. We have our application running here. And now we click on products to check if if the database is being neatly accessed or not. And here you can see the database is being successfully accessed here. And to now further test the persistency, we simply restart our app. Now let us just go here and restart it. Click on products. You can see that the data has still survived. If we did not do all those persistency settings or the volumes, the data would have been lost. So in few more seconds, I'll just reload this again so that once again you can be convinced about the persistency. So this is the data, all the data which has been present in the CSV file as shown. I simply perform the same steps which I showed here. I simply ran this. I mean, here in Azure, we can't run it like that, but same steps apply there. I went to phpMadmin, created the database and the table, and then populated it with in the same way as I had done here. Now let me click on reload. So you can see that the data is still being persisted. So if you want to fill the data there, you have to just go to phpMadmin. Admin. So the phpMadmin will basically have the database, same thing which I showed earlier. So same thing I did, you have to do here also. Simply go here to new, create a database known as staff, and then create a database known as college, and then create the columns which I had shown there with appropriate data types and lengths. Then we have to import the from the CSV file all the data which was present. So all this so all this data you have to import here. So once that's done, you can see the results which we were seeing earlier. So that's all, guys. This is how we have successfully deployed a Dockerized web application on a public cloud platform. Thank you.